Rest easy, my fellow Americans. The United States is not at war. It's not been invaded. And the American Civil Liberties Union caught Donald Trump flat-footed, filed a lawsuit in the federal courts in D.C., obtained a temporary restraining order against Donald Trump declaring a phony war and trying to use the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 in non-wartime to turbocharge his deportation plans. We got developments in the case with Judge Boasberg now over the weekend, following a hearing late on Saturday, expanding the temporary restraining order and doing it in a very crafty way to avoid any argument that there is he doesn't have the power to issue a nationwide injunction. You've heard this over and over again in the last day or so. Nationwide injunctions are beyond the power of federal judges, says MAGA. Well, Judge Boasberg's got one for them. And the ACLU was smart to ask for a class certification. A class certification of all those impacted by Donald Trump's phony proclamation of war are now restricted and blocked from being deported for the next 14 days while Judge Boasberg gets his mind around the briefing about whether it should be extended indefinitely. Donald Trump's already run to an appellate court, but if these matters are going to stay with Judge Boasberg, at least for this week. I break it down for you right here on the MeidasTouch Network and Legal AF. You've heard the news. We are at war. We've been invaded. There's an imminent act of invasion. It's the Venezuelan drug cartel gangs, and they're being led by the Maduro regime in Venezuela. What do we do about it? Listen, the drug gang narcotics narco-terrorism issue. I get it. It's a real issue. It doesn't constitute an imminent invasion or a war against America by a foreign power. I mean, the gang, for instance, that's now a narco-terrorist organization, which has been here for over 10 years, for instance. I don't think any aspect of them constitutes a warring body, even though they're calling it in the proclamation by Donald Trump, I'll read to you in a minute, some sort of irregular war participant. Tren de Aragua, or TDA, has been here for quite some time, as have other narco-terrorism gangs coming out of El Salvador. But that's not what that war power is for. The Alien Enemies Act, as Judge Boasberg has recognized, was put on the books in 1798, along with a bunch of other alien acts, the Alien Sedition Act, the Alien Enemies Act. It's the only one left. It was given as a power to President Adams, of all people, to use in wartime, or in the threat or the imminent threat or incursion associated with war. That's why it's only been used during World War I, World War II, and the War of 1812. In World War II, it was used in an unconstitutional way to put into concentration camps Italians, Germans, and mainly Japanese Americans. And then it was overturned, the use of that power by FDR was overturned by the United States Supreme Court years later. Donald Trump has been warning America that he was planning to declare a phony war since the campaign. How imminent can it be? Since Project 2025 has been talking about it for 3 years. The Heritage Foundation has been talking about it longer than that. Donald Trump campaigned on it 2 years ago. How imminent of an incursion or a war could it be? Isn't that the very definition of it's not an imminent threat? Is that they've been talking about it all this time? It even took him 60 days within the administration to sign the proclamation. Boasberg's not having any of it. But what I love about what happened on the hearing on Saturday afternoon and through Sunday is that, and then ACLU, I want to really compliment them. They have a project devoted to immigrant rights, and their immigrant rights project co-director argued the case. They filed this lawsuit. Just how crafty the ACLU is. They filed their lawsuit before Donald Trump had actually published the proclamation declaring war against Venezuela and TDA, and by extension, our civil liberties. He had signed it apparently on Friday, Trump, but he didn't publish it until Saturday. I'll put it up on the screen in a minute. And they were ready. They had already moved on Friday for the lawsuit. By Friday/Saturday morning, they had their TRO in place. And the TRO was in one form, and it's now been expanded considerably since the hearing last night. And I'll tell you about that now. It started as a case involving 6 or so Venezuelans who would be subject to this proclamation if it ever got published. And they got the TRO applied to these 6 or 8, with the judge declaring yesterday, early yesterday, these 6 or 9 are not going to get deported until 2 more weeks. Then he held a hearing by Zoom at 5 o'clock on Saturday. And the lawyers for the ACLU and the Trump administration came in, and then the judge did something extraordinary. He expanded considerably the scope of his temporary restraining order. And he did it in a way that was very novel and hits MAGA right where they live. They keep complaining that federal judges are exceeding their Article 3 power from the Constitution, and they're by issuing nationwide injunctions. No one single federal judge should ever do a nationwide injunction. It should only be, what they say next is, it should only be in the form of a class action lawsuit. Okay, well, the ACLU asked for a class action of all people negatively impacted and subject to the proclamation by Donald Trump to evict all Venezuelans and other people who are undocumented from this country. So that is the class. So the judge didn't enter a nationwide injunction. So lower your temperature, MAGA. He entered a injunction pursuant to a class that he's preliminarily certified. See, that's different. And so the judge said, I'm going to set a briefing schedule as well. And I like the briefing schedule and the speed at which he's going to have the briefing and the hearing, because it undercuts the ability for the Department of Justice, for Trump to run into appellate court, either the D.C. Court of Appeals or the United States Supreme Court, and ask for emergency relief. Because we've seen this movie already recently. Even the Supreme Court was like, you know what? We don't like incomplete records. Develop the record with the trial judge below. It's a week from now. I think this is how it's going to go here too. Come back to us after you go through the proper procedures and proper logistics. So Boasberg, anticipating this, said, we're going to move everybody very, very quickly through this briefing schedule. And so on Monday, the judge has ordered, let me get the schedule here. Monday, the Trump administration needs to file its opposition to the temporary restraining order, now certifying the class preliminarily and entering the injunction to stop the use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport people. 2 days later, there's the final brief by the ACLU, then a hearing on Friday. And that's how quick this is all going to go. And by Friday, the judge is going to either keep the temporary restraining order in place or vacate the temporary restraining order or change the terms of it or something. If Donald Trump, who's already filed a notice of appeal with the D.C. Court of Appeals, asks Boasberg for a stay while he prosecutes his appeal, Boasberg's going to likely say no. Brief your issues with me at the trial level. We'll see you on Friday for the hearing. If he goes to the D.C. appellate court, where he's already filed a notice of appeal on this issue, and Trump asked for a stay of the proceedings to allow for the appeal to block the temporary restraining order, I am sure the D.C. Court of Appeals is going to say, what's the rush? What's the irreparable harm? You've been in office for more than 60 days. This is the first time you got around to doing it. 5 more days, you have them all in custody. It's not like you got to go get them. You got all of them in Guantanamo Bay, the Venezuelans and others, and you have them in starting to be in detention camps and processing camps and in jails. So we can wait 5 more days. I am sure that's what the D.C. Appellate Court's going to say. If he tries to then leap over to get to the Supremes, I don't think he's going to find 4 votes or even 5 votes to find this interesting before Chief Judge Boasberg at the trial court level completes the briefing schedule. And then once that's done next Friday, then Donald Trump can go ask for the TRO to be blocked after the judge is done developing the record and the evidence, or the Supreme Court through Chief Justice Roberts can go do something about it. But I think for now, the law of the land is going to be Boasberg's temporary restraining order, expanded following yesterday's hearing on Saturday, to now certify a class and enjoin the use of the Alien Enemies Act, or this proclamation from Saturday by Donald Trump, to try to deport people in a turbocharged manner. Everybody just status quo. Venezuelans, you stay where you are in custody of the American immigration officials and in whatever detention center or Guantanamo that you're in. Lawyers, work on your briefing. We'll see you all on Friday. Appellate court's going to be like, Boasberg, you got this. Supreme Court's going to be Boasberg and my lower court, you got this. We'll see everybody next weekend. And until then, those people sit where they are, and that's been challenged. Now, there's all this jumping up and down by MAGA. Oh, a federal judge is interfering with a commander-in-chief, finding that there's war. Let's talk about that for a minute. In order to declare war, the president can't do it. He's the commander-in-chief after a war has been declared by Congress. Last I looked, Congress hasn't declared war or found that we're at war. Now we're going to have a whole congressional debate, phony debate about war. TDA has been in this country for 10 plus years. MS-13, another gang out of El Salvador, been here for 15 years or 20 years. We've had gangs, drug gangs in America, unfortunately, for a long, long time under many, many administrations. It just doesn't constitute an incursion or an invasion or a war being perpetrated by the Maduro regime in Venezuela. It may be other things, but it's not that. There's a reason that it's seen as a presidential war power, not to be used in peacetime, right? World War I, War of 1812, World War II. Get it? That's where you use this kind of stuff. And I also think it cuts against the administration because they've been talking about using the Alien Enemies Act from 1798 like for the last 4 years. How imminent is it? It's not. Donald Trump didn't even do it on his day one. It wasn't part of the 30 or 40 executive orders that he launched at all. So that's what's going to happen over the next week. We'll continue to follow it. You're here on the MeidasTouch Network. You're on Legal AF. This is my analysis for you. Michael Popok. Follow me on all things Legal AF. Come over to the Legal AF YouTube channel where we do in collaboration with MeidasTouch. Hit the subscribe button there as we continue to build our audience. We just crossed over 500,000 in record time, less than 6 months, all because of you. And then, of course, Legal AF, the podcast, here on MeidasTouch Network and on everywhere you get your podcast from. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. In collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.